I was told that there was a prize for the most slides, so I have quite a few slides here. The slide to time ratio is extremely high, so we'll skip through some of them. I think the last speaker was a great intro actually into mine. That last question was a very appropriate question, and I'll get into that in the presentation. I'm John Gibbons. I'll be talking today about leading the way in global agribusiness and combating the supply-demand imbalance. Broken down into five components. I'll talk first about agri-complex, long-term structural trends, our history, how we fit in to some of these trends, industry analysis, what's going on in our space and some of our competitors, and then our strategy going forward. And last but certainly not least, are some of our programs on corporate responsibility and sustainability and what that means for Olam. So as we've heard already this morning, we see the same sort of things most people are seeing, an imbalance between supply and demand. On the demand side, things like growing population, increasing food consumption, the move toward more proteins, especially in places like China, the urbanization move again in places like China, the higher use of biofuel. And on the supply side, things like energy prices, water constraints, climate change, carbon constraints, environmental constraints, and controlling the choke points in logistics. And because of this, we find that the agri-complex is a very attractive industry with strong prospects for people like us. This slide is just on the population growth, really relevant for us. We started in Nigeria. We're in many ways an African company, but our headquarters is now in Singapore. So the two regions where we see where there will be the most population growth is right in regions where we started as well as where we're currently based. As far as again, as we talked a little bit about earlier about the areas where we do see where there will be cropland expansion, primarily where there's potential for that is the sub-Saharan Africa as well as Latin America. And I think maybe just to address a question right away, we see a lot of opportunity in sub-Saharan Africa to grow crops. We think things are a lot different than they used to be, especially from the NGO side. We have people like the Gates Foundation really pumping money and really doing the right things to get production up, to get yields up. We've done programs in Nigeria with the UN on rice, where we've brought rice yields up considerably. So we see a lot just recently in the past 5 years or so in increasing yields in sub-Saharan Africa. So just this applies to the next slide. Just there's a bunch of definitions for arable land. So this is sort of eye chart here. But the places where we are sort of our backyard are typically emerging markets, difficult third world environments. So in places like Nigeria, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, we're very comfortable. So our model is to operate in these countries and do things on things like increasing yields locally there. Water, there's going forward, the water, there's water shortages now, and looking forward into 2025, 36 countries, home to 1.4 billion people, will be dramatically impacted by water scarcity. Nothing new on this. We see as far as food prices going forward, we see them continuing to be high, continuing to be volatile. Now, just a little bit of our history, because I'm sure some of you haven't heard much about us. We're relatively a new company, particularly in the U.S. We started in the U.S. Back in 2004. We've been around since 1989. We started in Nigeria with 2 employees. One is who started the company and is still our CEO today, Sonny Verghese. He had an assistant. We were doing one product, which was cashews. We were exporting cashews from Nigeria to India. We were selling them to 4 customers, all who were traders. And we had those 2 employees with a relatively small nominal book value and nominal market value. A lot has happened clearly since then to where we are today. We operate in 64, 65 different countries. We went public in February 2005. We're listed on the Singapore Exchange. And the turnover last year of 14 billion US. These are the different parts of the supply chain where we operate. We do different things depending on the product. I'll get a little bit more into this in the next few slides. From farming origination, logistics, processing, marketing solutions, and finally trading and distribution. So this is our the countries where we operate. And typically, or actually in most cases, in all these countries, it's a serious infrastructure. So in places like China, we have 600 or 700 different people. In a country like Mozambique, we have a cashew plant that has 5,000 people. So in pretty much all these countries, we have serious infrastructure, be it factories, be it port facilities, be it people. So it's not sort of an agency model. It's going deep into these emerging markets and setting up infrastructure. So those are just a list of the countries, and that's our portfolio. We break it down for reporting purposes into these four segments: edible nuts, spices, and beans, confectionery and beverage items, food staples and packaged foods, and industrial raw materials. So these are some of our customers on the food side. Most of our products are food, with the exception of wood products and cotton. A customer like Nestle is sort of a perfect customer for us, where they'll buy from us or could buy from us dairy products, cocoa, peanuts, coffee, tomato paste, onions, garlic. With a lot of these customers, they're multiple product customers. I think that really gives us an edge in being able to have one supply chain into the customer. We have one IT system, we have one HR department, and so I think that gives us an edge versus a lot of the spaces where we compete. It's a lot of times it's one product company. Some of the recent accolades, and they're sort of, the themes are around sort of three different things. One is on transparency. When we started back in '89, some of the early investors were the World Bank through IFC, government of Singapore through Temasek. So we're very used to, and they demanded transparency from us. So we're very used to being very transparent. As we got bigger and then went public, investors demanded the same thing. And now these same sort of customers are demanding exactly the same thing. Traceability, transparency. So that's something we're very comfortable with, going right back in many cases to the farm, to in the case of, let's say, cocoa, to where the cocoa comes from, and bring it all the way back to a customer like Nestle or Hershey, and being able to trace it all the way back. The second type of award is, a lot of times it's around entrepreneurship, all the way from the top of the organization, with our CEO Sonny, who started the company, all the way down to the bottom levels. It's a very entrepreneurial culture. And the third one is on HR, and there was a case study on Olam a few years back, and they talked about, they interviewed our head of HR, global HR, Jody Bose, who's based in Singapore, and they asked him about the recruiting and how we recruit. And this was a few years back, so he said, well, we go into the top business schools in India, and we talk to the top people, and we tell them we have 50 jobs and open, and they're all in Nigeria. And so that eliminates about half the people. But the idea is we want to get that sort of person, the person who wants to go into a difficult, sometimes difficult emerging market, and really start a business, and build a business for themselves and for us. So that kind of goes back to the entrepreneurial theme as well. So it's a big business, $5.2 billion business that we're in, and oops. Oh, I don't know what happened to that slide. Okay. This slide, I think I had the same problem as Gerald. I got messed up on the flight out here. But Most of the spaces that we're in are dominated by large players. In the case of things like corn, it's the ABCDs, it's the ADMs, it's the Cargills, the Bungys, the Dreyfuses. We typically operate in some of in the smaller markets, such as cocoa, coffee. So I would say that the large global players, these ABCDs that we often come up against, are competing on scale, becoming bigger, on controlling choke points, controlling things like ports, controlling information flow, new geographies and expansions, and more recently, superior capital management. Oops. We still see a lot of consolidation. There's been a lot that's already happened in most of these sectors, and we see that continuing. So things like citrus, this is a Brazil sugar and Brazil citrus. We see that type of consolidation still taking place, and continue to take place going forward in these larger commodities where we compete. Cost savings, people like, and we put ourselves with this group, ADM, Bunge, Noble. We're essentially, in many ways, in a commodity business, trying to get our costs down, and things like reducing G&A. So we're right in there with these other guys trying to reduce costs. And controlling the critical assets. So an example would be like Dreyfus, controlling, in the case of cotton in the U.S., controlling ginning, controlling warehousing. In the case of Wilmar, controlling the processing at origin. And then growing into new products. And we're like us. I mean, we started with one product, and now we're in 15. And these other guys are pretty much doing the same thing over the years. And global expansion, again, just like us, going to other geographies to achieve revenue. It's been a difficult trading environment. I won't spend too much time on that, but we're all impacted by some of these macro trends, be it the drought in the Midwest, which impacts our dairy business, be it the European crisis, which impacts sales of things like cashews, tomatoes, onions, garlic. And be it political unrest throughout the world, be it coups in Ivory Coast, or issues in other parts of other emerging markets. So our vision is to be the leading global supply chain manager and processor of agri-commodities. We spend a lot of time on meetings talking about opening up the capital spread. We are a public company, so it's all about the shareholders, and serving growers and customers globally, and looking at attractive niches. So in something like the grain complex, where we don't go head to head with the ABCDs and somewhere in like the U.S., but we do a lot in places like Nigeria, where we do flour milling there. We have controlled port facilities. So sometimes it's a big business we're in, but we're in a small part of the business. In other businesses, like let's say cashews, which are grown in 14 different countries, we're in every single country we're in every single country where it's grown, and we're by far the #1 player. So it's either full control in a smaller business, or a big niche in a huge business. These are some of the questions that we ask, and I'll go into some of these in the next few slides, if our strategy has been effective. Does our strategy allow us to perform consistently across economic and commodity cycles? A lot of we are mostly in the food products, so these tend to be a little less recession-proof than some of the other commodities. We are in the supply chain. We're a very small part of our revenue and P&L is from trading, so it's almost like a fee-type business. We're integrated. We integrate selectively in certain parts of the supply chain, and we are spread across several platforms. So we use consultants a lot, so as you can probably tell from these slides. So what we do, this is where we were in 2007. So we break down the supply chain into three essential components. There's upstream, which is growing stuff typically, supply chain, which is managing the supply chain from the origin to the final customer, and then the midstream, downstream, which is typically some sort of first stage processing. In some cases, it's making the final product, but in most cases, it's doing some preliminary step before it goes to the branded company. So this is where we were in 2007, and this is where we were. This is where we are. Where we're last year in 2011 across these different products. So what we do is we look at something like cocoa, which is grown. It's primarily from West Africa, and as well as some from Asia and Latin America. We look at the whole supply chain. We say, okay, the cocoa is grown. We put a value in each part of the supply chain. So cocoa, as far as it's grown, it's mostly smallholders who have they farm an acre or less, and there's millions of cocoa farmers. But there's a lot of money in that value pool, and then the cocoa goes to the port. In the case of Ivory Coast, goes to Abidjan, and that's part of the supply chain. From there, it's cleaned further, it's put into bags, it's exported to places like to Europe and U.S. It's processed by a preliminary process. It's made into powder, liquor, butter, and then those ingredients go to someone like Hershey or Nestle. Nestle, they put it on the shelf, and they sell it as a finished product, be it a Hershey bar or a Nestle Quick. So we look at the how much money is each part of the supply chain worth, and that's the first part. So we look at cocoa. It's like there's a lot of money being made by the branded companies, and there's a lot of money as a group being made by the farmers. But we can't compete in those. We can't really add any value in either side of that. We're not set up to have do small scale farming. On the other end, we're not set up, and we don't want to compete with our customers. Going into the branded business is a completely new thing for us. So those parts we kind of cross off, but most of those other parts in between, we feel like there's significant value. So we do compete. So we do pretty much every part of the supply chain, and including some preliminary processing, and making things like cocoa powder and cocoa butter, which do go to people like Nestle and Hershey. Let's show the same slide. So these are some of the examples of some of the upstream stuff we're doing. We do peanut farming in Argentina, rice farming in Nigeria and Mozambique, cotton farming in Brazil and Mozambique, grain farming. Again, going back to some of these countries which are maybe less desirable, where they have more political instability, where we're more comfortable. We do grain farming in Russia, tomato farming in the U.S., and then on the dairy side, a couple of the dairy projects we do farming in Uruguay. We have 90,000 acres of cattle. We do cattle. We have cattle there for dairy, 30,000 cows, and then some of the tree crops we do. We have in the U.S. we have 3,500, actually more. We have 7,000 acres of almonds now in California, and 30,000 acres of almonds in Australia. That makes us the second biggest almond grower. Some of these things we're doing, like cocoa, it's a relatively small project in Indonesia. Things like pepper plantations in Cambodia. It's actually a big business for us. We haven't, the pepper hasn't, it's not ready to harvest yet, but things like the coffee in Laos. Those are places where we look, and again, looking at where there's arable land, where there's available land, where we really have an edge. And those are the places we go. We do in Congo and Gabon, we have 1.2 million hectares of forest concessions there, and then the teak plantations in Latin America. So we think, do we have a defensible portfolio? So a lot of these products we look at, we say, okay, something like tomatoes, where we compete in California, where we process 1 million tons of tomatoes a year. We do 10,000 tons a day for 100 days during the season. We have 2 or 3 big competitors, but they're just in tomatoes. And people like cocoa, we have 2 or 3 big competitors, but for the most part, the bigger ones are just in cocoa. So in each of the products, we may not distinguish ourselves. It's hard to distinguish ourselves from a competitor in a lot of these products. But we can distinguish ourselves just on the product. We can distinguish ourselves by looking at the whole portfolio. So we go to someone like Nestle, we go to someone like Mars, we say we have the whole portfolio, And these guys are craft. I mean, they're trying to eliminate the number of suppliers they have. And things like credit and things like being able to finance and this type of thing. So a lot of the cases in a particular product, it's not like we're better than the next guy in that particular product, but as an organization, we feel like we feel like we have an edge. And we feel like that's what makes us defensible. And things like in the grain complex, again, we don't kind of go after, we don't try to compete in the Midwest with the ABCDs, but we do compete with them in places like Africa. We're probably a bigger player than they are, I know, than places like Nigeria. But we don't compete in the mainstream stuff for the most part. Let me just jump. I just got the 5-minute warning, so let me just quickly go on this slide. So this is our sort of edge that we feel like we have overall. This is the delivery model. We're experts in emerging markets. That's where we started in Nigeria. We're very comfortable in those difficult places. Everything we've done is based on the adjacency model. So we started in cashews. We had, it's a 3-month crop. We had 9 months we had infrastructure for the whole year, 9 months of people in Nigeria doing nothing, so we got into other products. And that's how we went from cashews to shea nuts to cocoa to cotton in Nigeria. It's exactly the same model we have in California, where we're growing tomatoes, we're growing almonds, we're growing onions, we're growing garlic. Organizational advantage, a lot of that's around entrepreneurship, superior origination trading. Again, that's where we're good at. We started at the origin, and that's still very much the base of our business. Okay, let me just go. I want to get to the. So, corporate responsibility and sustainability. Operating in these places, we have to be doing the right thing in our community, and that's from when we started. It's not. I think going the other way is much more challenging for someone to start in U.S. or Europe and go that way, kind of go the other way. It's, I think, more challenging than how we started. We started there, so we started as part of the community in Nigeria. So a lot of the stuff we do a lot of stuff in a lot of different places, but for the most part, what we're doing is based on helping communities in Africa, which is really our backyard. So we have a lot of different initiatives. A lot of them are around things like improving yields. We partner with a lot of the NGOs. We do a lot with the Gates Foundation on things like improving yields, helping farmers. We do a fair amount in schools and that type of thing, education for the kids of the farmers. But again, it's mostly about helping the communities where we operate. So as we've gotten bigger, we have something like 20,000 employees now. We would look at now more and more the whole chain. So we have in the U.S. we have almost 4,000 employees. A lot of them are in offices. So we look at things like at the other end of the spectrum, things like office buildings, about turning lights off when you leave, that sort of thing. So we're looking more and more at the whole chain. But again, really what we're doing, I think, is where we really can make an impact is in places like Africa. That's our livelihood charter, which is on our website, and I can also circulate that to you separately. Skip over that. That's it. So I don't know if we have time for a couple questions or.